All right, so let's move back a little bit. So we all know that we do have different realities. That is, in our classrooms, we have as many different realities as students. And so how can we cater for the needs of all students? Okay, we do have that in differentiated instruction. And what is differentiated instruction? It is an effective teaching approach composed of different elements, and it is our response to learners' needs, shaped by mindset and guided by principles. One of the elements is an environment that supports learning, and the environment refers to both the physical and the affective environment, the affective climate in the classroom. The way in which students experience the classroom learning environment shapes how they experience learning. And if we look back on our early days as students, I can think of my days in secondary school or my days as a teacher training college student. We will remember probably circumstances or subjects, for example, in which the climate was wonderful and others in where it wasn't that wonderful, and how that shaped our perception of that particular subject. Then a quality curriculum, that is essential. If the curriculum is flat or seems to be detached from a student's world, that students' need for challenge, purpose isn't met, and the environment suffers, obviously. Another element, another key element is assessment that informs teaching. If assessment is punitive and fails to provide useful information to help students succeed, then the environment feels uncertain. And finally, another element is instruction that responds to student variance. If instruction is not responsive to students' needs in terms of readiness, interest, and approach to learning, the environment doesn't feel safe and students don't feel valued. So, if we believe in the ability of the content and the curriculum to improve our students' prospects and lives, we should be eager to know how each student is progressing towards achieving their goals and the classroom's goals. Assessment should be a natural diagnostic process in the classroom. So, for differentiation to be effective, we need to know for each student where that student begins and where the student is in their individual journey towards meeting the criteria, the success criteria of the lesson or the unit. So we can safely say that assessment acts like a compass. It's the compass for daily planning in a differentiated classroom. So, how can we differentiate? Okay, we can differentiate content, process, product, basically, but then we can also differentiate by grouping, by questioning. There are different ways in which we can differentiate in our classroom. Now, instruction is at the core of differentiation because the ultimate goal of differentiation is to make sure each student has the best possible learning experience in order to maximize growth. So achieving this depends on effective instructional practices, an effective curriculum, effective assessment, classroom leadership, and management. So I've mentioned readiness, interest, and learning profile. What do I mean by this? Readiness. Readiness is not a synonym of capacity to learn. It refers to a student's proximity to specified learning goals. So planning instruction based on readiness on readiness guides us to think, okay, what does the student need to succeed? Interest, as we all know, because of our own personal experience too, is a great motivator for learning. It can refer to a skill or a topic that taps into a student's talents or interests or experiences. And it can also refer to ideas, skill, or work that appeal to the student. So our question should be, what is this student interested in? And last but not least, the learning profile. Learning profile differentiation seeks to provide learners with approaches to learning that make the process more efficient or more effective. It is shaped by gender, culture, environment, biology, and learning context. So, the goal of learning profile differentiation should be to create more ways in which learners can take in, engage, and demonstrate knowledge. Also, help them develop an awareness of what approaches to learning work best for them and guide them to know when and how to change to improve the learning outcomes. So our question should be, what are the best approaches to learning for this particular student? Now, it's useful to think about assessment in terms of when to assess, what should be assessed, and why assessment might be used. So, effective differentiation requires teachers to assess students' status before a unit of work begins, that is, pre-assessment. Throughout a unit of work, that is, ongoing or formative assessment, and then at key endings, which involves summative assessment. So, as you can see, when we talk about formative assessment, we don't mean to say that we should only be using formative assessment and do without summative assessment. All kinds of assessment are essential. So, pre or diagnostic assessment will help will help us determine a student's starting point with learning targets. And it will help teachers develop an awareness of the students' interests and learning preferences. Formative or ongoing assessment will help monitor our students' evolving knowledge, understanding, and skills. And then the summative assessment will help us evaluate our learners' status with the learning targets or learning intentions. And what to assess? We have seen that there are 3 ways in which learning can be effective: readiness, interest, and learning profile. Okay, so we can better focus on our planning if we understand our students' differences in these 3 areas. So we should assess all 3. All the 3, understanding student readiness calls for more persistent assessment and analysis of the information so as to be able to plan curriculum and instruction. So, when planning pre-assessment, it's important to be clear about what students should know, understand, and be able to do as a result of a unit of study. And that means KUD. So, we need to be clear on the critical vocabulary, for example, in the unit, the K, the know, the basic understandings, that is the U, about the significance of the unit, and the content skills at the core of what students will learn to do in the unit, that is the D, the do. Sometimes we may want to assess one of the 3 elements, but most of the time it makes sense to tap on all 3 because they are all important in understanding the students' varying starting points with the content of the unit. So the key UDs are critical. So, the first question that we should ask when composing a pre-assessment is, what case, use, and these am I trying to measure here? We may also want to assess the students' readiness to provide clarity of students' prior knowledge related to the content of the unit. This also helps identify misconceptions, gaps in learning, in knowledge, or in skills. It also provides information about the level of mastery of the new content so that the instruction is appropriately targeted to the varied levels of proficiency. Now, when we are doing pre-assessment, there are some informal pre-assessment strategies that we can use. They are unstructured and they don't aim at collecting data in a systematic way. And some examples of these are, for example, student self-reporting. And this involves their awareness of where they believe they are relative to the knowledge, understanding, and skill, and allows them to develop self-reflection and assessment skills. And it can be done very quickly and with minimal intrusion in the instruction, because that's another, that's a point that is worrying when we come to think of formative assessment and differentiated instruction. Normally teachers think, okay, of all the things that I have to do, I also have to do this. Where will I get the time? This is something that we can incorporate readily into our teaching without additional time, instructional time being spent on this. This happens at class level rather than at individual level. So it may be difficult to get an accurate reading of the status of individual students. But we have other means, yes? For example, KWL charts or other organizers, such as concept maps or Venn diagrams. Hand signals like thumbs up, down or sideways, showing 1 to 3 fingers on, so that students can tell us how they feel about the content. Response cards. Response cards are very simple. You pose a question to which students respond by holding up a card with a prepared option on it. And each student can have 3 cards to select from, A, B, C, or 2 yes/no cards. So they can hold up the cards and we can have a quick check of the proportion of correct answers. And of course, our own observations. While students work, we can help them become aware of particular interests, way of working, behaviors, skill levels, and this information should involve our planning for upcoming lessons. There are other simple things that we can do. For example, the windshield checks. We can have 3 pictures where we have a clear sky. I understand it. Buggy, I understand it for the most part, but some things are still unclear, or muddy. I don't have a clue. I don't understand it yet. So with these pictures, students can quickly tell us how they feel about the content. Now, some more formal pre-assessment strategies are structured moments when instructional time is given up with the aim of gathering data at individual level across the class. Most strategies that are useful for pre-assessment are also useful for formative or ongoing assessment. Now, the key difference stems from the way instructional time is affected and the level at which information is obtained from the class or from individual students. So we can have systematic observations, we can have individual interviews with students, or we can have some systematic observations of present work, individual work, and record these observations on pre-designed checklists or guides. We can also use journal entries and writing prompts. That is, we pose a question and students respond in writing. For example, 1 minute writing about how familiar they are with a particular writing genre. Just 1 minute. It's like an entry ticket that can be used. Then show and tell. We pose a question and students illustrate and explain what they know about that. This is especially useful with students who find writing difficult, but know something about the topic or the skill at hand. So they can quickly sketch something or tell us what they know. Quizzes, for example, yes, and interest surveys. We can design simple surveys so that students tell us what their preferred mode of working is. They can rank options to their interests, yes, and they can elaborate on approaches to learning that they prefer. Here you have an example, yes, of an interest survey. As you can see, it's very simple. We can choose, it doesn't need to be this long. It can be 5 questions. Also, you can use Freya models. Freya models are quite useful. And in the center figure, in the center circle, you write a concept or a topic for an upcoming lesson, and you ask students to share their current knowledge in the 4 quadrants. And these are called definition in your own word, facts or characteristics that you know, examples or non-examples. That is an example of what the concept is, and a non-example is an example of what it is not. It is something related to a topic or concept, but not quite the same thing. So, as we can see, assessment is useful because it reveals what the students know, understand, and are able to do. And even though it's not imperative to differentiate every assessment, it's wise to consider the fact that it might be very short-sighted to differentiate instruction to support student success, but then neglect to attend to student learning differences on formative and summative assessments that are key to successful learning. So, one thing I would like to make clear is that differentiated an assessment doesn't suggest creating different assessments for each student, but rather ensuring access of opportunity to each and every student to demonstrate their learning. In differentiating assessment, one attribute should always remain unchanged across all versions of the assessment: the knowledge, the understanding and skill for which the student is responsible. It's even okay if everyone doesn't have the same questions, so that the challenge matches the student development. But both versions of the assessment should measure the same K, U, and Ds, the same knowledge, understanding, and do. That is very, very important. Now, as with pre-assessments, ongoing or formative assessments need to happen with the students, not to them. Sometimes assessment happens to students. It's something that okay, I'll catch you out on this. No. Let's say, ongoing or formative assessment need to happen with the students because it should develop autonomous learners. The key goal for schools should be to develop autonomous learners. That is, young people who are confident and competent in identifying goals or purposes for learning. It should help find and use suitable resources and experiences that can help our students achieve those goals. It should help monitor their progress. it should help adjust the learning process as necessary to revise or accomplish those goals. It should also help verify the degree to which the goals are met or exceeded, and help our students become more aware of the goals and success criteria so that they can measure the success against those success criteria. Now, the classroom instruction, assessment cycle provides a powerful vehicle for teaching learners the skills of autonomous learning. Here I try to illustrate how that might work as we help students develop awareness of learning goals. So first we have the pre-assessment, and the student thinks, what are my strengths and needs compared to my objectives as I begin a new phase of learning? These are questions that we need to help our students ask themselves. So as we move on to the ongoing assessment, the questions should be, how am I doing in moving towards my goals? How can I continue to grow? And finally, at the summative assessment stage, how well did I accomplish my goal? Why or why not? What do I take forward with me as I keep learning? What changes can I make in my learning? What new resources can I use? All these questions are part of the learning cycle, and also help our students develop metacognitive strategies, which are so important for helping students succeed in their learning. The more aware our students are of their learning processes, their mental processes in learning, the more successful they will be in making changes, in making improvements, and reaching their goals. So this is really key in order to help them succeed in their learning. So if we have a look at ongoing assessment, let's see, many formats are appropriate for pre-assessing the student's readiness and interest, and they are also useful for ongoing assessment. Now, it's always a good idea to develop one's own strategies and adapt them to our particular context. I can give you lots of examples, and I will give you some examples, but then it's important that you look for those that are better for you, better for your context, adapt what you see. Many a time I have seen lots of techniques that are wonderful, are suggested as the key to doing this, and that, but then I have tried them with my own students and I have had to make adjustments. So be aware that whatever I tell you needs to be adapted to your own style of teaching, to your own students, and to your own context. And one thing that we need to be aware of is that as we examine assessment outcomes, these outcomes will help us understand the quality of the data that we have obtained, examine the degree to which students have mastered the instructional goals, look for misconceptions and gaps in learning, and also, and very importantly, and this I think looks a little bit back on what Peter Lucantoni said a couple of hours ago, reflect on our own teaching effectiveness, because the whole purpose of being an effective teacher is to help our students become effective learners. So let's have a quick look at some direct or formal strategies for ongoing assessment. And we have, for example, graphic organizers, where students complete a graphic organizer on a topic or a question posed by you. Also, we can review or assess the work according to pre-established criteria to determine the student's proficiency in the topic or question. We can use exit cards or tickets, We can use 3-2-1 cards. We can use entry cards, exercises, weather report, homework, and quizzes. Let's have a look at this. Here you have examples of some of graphic organizers. And let's face it, you can have a look at the internet and find literally thousands of different examples, and you can create your own depending on what you need. Exit tickets are wonderful because you can pose one or more questions directly related to the lesson, and then students can provide brief responses on exit cards, on cards, on slips of paper, on sticky notes. Yes, and what I like them to do is to post those exit tickets on a notice board, and then I have a look at that, and I can have a clear idea of what learning has taken place, how much understanding has taken place. And of course, you can create your own exit tickets. Again, you can find hundreds, thousands of examples of exit tickets online. But as I said before, adapt that to your own context. We can have 3-2-1 cards. This is a kind of exit card in which a student responds to questions or prompts that ask for example, 3 responses, then 2, then 1. So you can use a variety of prompts here. Also, here you have another example of entry cards, like boarding cards. What I already know about the subject, one question I want to know the answer to, keywords I have learned, and a target for this lesson. And you can use QR codes and send them to different resources online. And a weather report, which is similar to the windshield that I showed before. Yes, so they can rate their proficiency with the topic or the skills by indicating sunny skies, a few high clouds, or fog and smog. This is wonderful for smaller children or younger teenagers. Now, let's see. How do assessment, grading, and differentiation come together? Probably the most frequently asked question about differentiation is, how do I grade it? Because there is a sense that differentiation and grading are at odds with one another. And some educators think of differentiation as having different goals for different students. And this perspective makes teaching and learning much more confusing and complicated, and turns grading into a nightmare. Because we don't have different goals for different students. What we do have is different roads to the same goal. Differentiation seeks to provide multiple pathways or support systems to the same content goals. This is very important to understand, so that virtually all learners can achieve higher levels of success with the same essential knowledge, understanding, and skill. Thus, a teacher in a differentiated classroom is not grading students on different goals, but rather providing feedback and grades based on a student's status relative to the same learning intentions. Some educators feel as though differentiation requires teachers to grade struggling learners easier and advanced learners harder. That, too, is a misconception. All students in a differentiated classroom should be graded against the same clearly delineated criteria, that is the KUDs. What the differentiated classroom does is provide an environment that maximizes the student's opportunity to achieve and, when possible, move beyond those criteria. So, at least 3 interrelated issues are integral to the philosophy of differentiation and are directly affected by assessment and grading practices. First, differentiation proposes that classroom practices including assessment and grading, should be designed to contribute to a growth mindset in students and teachers. Secondly, differentiation exists to keep students' success to effort ratios in balance. That is, students at all levels of proficiency clearly see that their hard work generally leads to visible success. And thirdly, differentiation proposes that a sense of team, of community, or collaboration is integral to student success, that students and teachers work to support maximum growth for all. And unfortunately, many current grading practices work directly against these three goals. For some students, the certainty of praise and success in school has become a drug, and they continually need more. For many other students, year upon year of not good enough has eroded their intellectual self-confidence and has resulted in a kind of mind-numbing malaise. Current assessment and grading practices are also counterproductive for a third group of students, those in the middle, in mid-ranges of achievement, who get the continual message that they are just average and not likely to change. So, sometimes how we teach, assess, and grade creates winners and losers in the classroom, and undercuts the sense that we are all stronger when we learn from each other. So the essential question we need to ask ourselves is, are there practices that reflect and support best practice assessment and grading, as well as the underpinning of differentiation? Yes. Best practices in assessment and grading are fully compatible with and supporting of the goals of quality differentiation, and they facilitate and enhance a robustly differentiated classroom. Grading and reporting should be seen as particular moments that happen periodically in a much longer cycle of planning, teaching, learning, feedback, and measurement. So, teaching and learning should be the primary focus of the classroom. At key points in a unit of study, summative assessments measure student growth towards and beyond the KUDs and result in marks entered into a gradebook. And at the end of a designated marking period, the teacher marks into grades and communicates them on a report card. Grading and reporting should reflect and support good classroom practices, not dictate them. At least that's my humble opinion. Let's have a quick look at some grading principles. Some guiding principles for effective grading. First of all, base grades on clearly specified learning goals. When we are clear about goals and how they work together to help learners make meaning of and use content, it's not a great leap to make sure they are clear about these goals as well. This principle increases reliability by providing consistency across classroom and increases validity by ensuring that assessments measure what they are intended to measure. Also, use grades that are criterion-based and not comparative. When students are compared with one another, they come to believe the goal is competition rather than personal development. Yes? Often the result is that struggling students come to believe that they lack the capacity for success, and high-achieving students conclude that success is an entitlement and not the result of commitment and hard work. Also, don't overgrade student work. Learning challenging content is useful, takes hard work and lots of practice. So along the way to this kind of deep learning, false starts, mistakes, redirections will necessarily occur. So it's important to help students see a direct connection between what we ask them to do for practice at school and at home, and their academic growth between the quality of their practice and their developing competence. Also, use only quality assessments. These are associated with higher student achievement, perhaps because those assessments suggest teachers whose planning and instruction are of high quality as well, and perhaps because such assessments encourage students to participate more enthusiastically in the learning process. Assessments are effectively when they measure student proficiency on clearly designated learning goals that are known to the students, and when they are carefully aligned with teaching and learning. No trick questions or gotcha items. Also, reduce grade fog. A grade should communicate as clearly as possible what a student knows, understands, and can do at a given point in time. Grade fog arises from anything that we do in the teaching, learning, assessment cycle that muddles the meaning or clarity of the grade. For example, when we deduct points from an assessment because that piece of work is not neat, because it's late, because the student's name is left out, or we add credit when we add credit to a grade. So when a grade serves multiple masters, it serves none of them well. So make sure that your grades assess what they are meant to assess and nothing else. Also, grade more heavily later in the grading cycle rather than earlier. When a student gets better marks later in a marking period, it suggests effort and growth. Earlier deficiencies in the same content ought not erode the student's growth or discourage persistence. So we need to grade more heavily as they progress, yes? When it's time for report cards, use 3P grading. That is, when we try to pack a wide variety of student characteristics into one grade, that grade is not a valid reflection of any of them. It's like the grade fog, and presents perhaps an inaccurate picture of a student's proficiency. So one solution is to practice the 3P grading. That is, report separate grades for a student's performance or product, the student's process or habits of mind and work that characterizes success, and we hope to help students develop, and the student's progress in specified objectives. These 3 Ps should not be averaged into one grade. Rather, they should be reported separately and with clear indicators of what each element represents. I know that this is not easy because there are school rules that determine how we grade our students, but maybe we should try and discuss this with school authorities. The 3P approach to grading is tightly aligned with a growth mindset message that if individuals work hard and intelligently to master specified goals, that is the process, they will continue to grow towards those goals, the progress, until they master the goals. And a final caveat. Students bring to the classroom a variety of differences. Regardless of these individual differences, all students are expected to master the same content standards, unless there are formal plans on record that indicate otherwise. So the dual reality of student differences juxtaposed with common expectations requires us to create classrooms that respect those differences and are thus structured to provide varied ways in which students can meet common content expectations. So it's effective attention to this student variance that encourages them to reach for successfully higher levels of proficiency, provide an environment that supports the risk of learning, and present students with a reason for optimism that each day will result in incremental success towards important goals. So just to finish, I would like to share with you some resources that I have found particularly useful. I especially encourage you to have a look at Inside the Black Box or Developing the Theory of Formative Assessment by Paul Black and Dylan William. I have found their work very, very useful and enlightening. And well then, thank you so much for attending this talk.